personalmente negativa.
6-year-old sandy-haired youngster disappeared from the Sears Hollywood Mall between 12:30 and 1:45 on Monday afternoon and is still missing at this hour.
July 27th, 1981. There was a toy department, there was electronics, there was video games, there was clothes, and an announcement comes over the PA. Attention shoppers, Adam Walsh, if you can hear this message, your mother is looking for you.
We'd like you shoppers to help us find Adam Walsh.
Adam Walsh was a 6-year-old boy who was with his mother at Sears at the Hollywood Mall that very same day. She went off to look at lamps, I believe, in the whole lighting section of the store. And she left Adam playing, I think, an Atari video game system in like the electronics section of the store.
Police say 6-year-old Adam Walsh is missing a front tooth. He was last seen wearing a beige canvas hat at the Hollywood Mall. Tonight, members of the Citizens Crime Watch of Hollywood continue to search for young Adam. Hollywood police detectives track down leads and help groups out scouring the area.
We've invited his parents, John and Reve Walsh, to be in Channel 4 studio in the hope that their words might be heard by the person or persons who police believe abducted young Adam.
We love Adam very much, and we have no vengeance for the people that have Adam. We do not want to prosecute the people. We just want our son back.
And just in case whoever took him wants to drop him off at the mall, they left the family's car in the same spot it was Monday when Adam left it, waiting for Adam to take him home.
And it was, at the time, the most sensational and highly publicized missing child case in the history of this country.
It's been a frustrating 5 days since 6-year-old Adam Walsh was last seen.
Adam is still missing.
We've searched and searched for Adam, and we haven't found a body, so everybody thinks he's alive. We do too.
Two weeks later, Adam Walsh's head was found.
2 fishermen found the remains of Adam Walsh's skull in this canal near Vero Beach, more than 100 miles north of his Hollywood home. Positive identification was made through dental records.
I don't know who would do this to a 6-year-old child. I can't conceive of it. It's beyond the realm of reality.
His body has never been found. His father, John Walsh, obviously became extremely famous for taking on the mission of missing and exploited children, later fugitives through his series America's Most Wanted. But at that time, there was a TV movie called Adam that aired in 1983 on NBC.
They were a loving, happy family until their son disappeared.
I've searched the whole mall and I can't find him.
Every parent's fear becomes the movie you must see.
The 1-2 punch of the case of Adam Walsh, and then this TV movie, which was watched by 38 million people the first time, and NBC aired it every single year thereafter for like 3 or 4 or 5 years. And during the show, during the commercial breaks, they would show photos of missing children.
I'm John Walsh. Our children are safer by the President's signing of the Missing Children Assistance Act of 1984.
It's too late for our Adam, but it's not too late for the thousands of children who are still out there.
What happened from there was basically we'll call it a mass panic. Misinformation, fear, and paranoia kind of gripped the country.
That's not Jenny's dad. If she gets into that car, you may be looking at Jenny for the last time. I'm McGruff, the crime dog.
There was a statistic put out at the time that later in a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation was found to be total bunk. And the statistics said that 20,000 children go missing every year in stranger abductions.
20,000 kids, one kid at a time, maybe your kid, on your street.
It turned out the real number was closer to like 70. Most child abductions are by people that are known to the person. A parent or a family member takes them. Stranger abductions were not nearly the plague that they were made out to be as a result of this horrific tragedy and crime that happened in South Florida with the Adam Walsh murder. We all became afraid of a boogeyman, basically. One of the suspects in the murder was a drifter and prostitute by the name of Otis Toole.
Otis Toole, a drifter and violent pedophile.
Guy was born in Jacksonville and made his way across the Southeast. He had an IQ of about 75, certainly was a challenged individual, and left a wake of dead people and crimes behind him everywhere he went. He was an associate of another known serial killer by the name of Henry Lee Lucas. Both of them unquestionably murderers who eventually died in prison, but they also were kind of, how should I say, fabulists. They liked to embellish their crimes and adventures, and in fact falsely confessed to numerous crimes.
How many crimes have you confessed to, Otis?
I don't know. I ain't counting.
More than 125?
I don't know.
I see you smiling.
One of the crimes that Otis Toole confessed to was the kidnapping and murder of Adam Walsh. Henry Lee Lucas claimed that he had witnessed part of this and had been in possession of Adam's head for part of those 2 weeks in between the kidnapping and discovery of Adam's head. They both later almost immediately recanted. There was never any witnesses. There was never any additional physical evidence or DNA. And in 2008, long after Toole died, the Hollywood police closed the case.
It is our determination and conclusion that Otis Toole was the abductor and murderer of Adam Walsh.
But through the years, a very compelling theory has arisen. It turns out that that year and that summer of 1981, Jeffrey Dahmer was living in Sunny Isles, Florida, just a few miles away from the Hollywood Mall. Jeffrey Dahmer had committed at least one murder at that time that we are now aware of. He was working at a sandwich shop, and Dahmer had access to a van, like a blue delivery van that the sub shop had, while Jeffrey Dahmer was living in South Florida. There was an attempted kidnapping at a mall in Palm Beach, Florida, of a young boy. The boy was able to get away. Similar to Adam Walsh, he was playing a video game in a store. Someone tried to abduct him. Young man, that man got away. And there is a sketch of that suspect.
The suspect is described as being a white male in his mid-20s, 5 foot 10 inches tall, 200 pounds, of medium complexion, and having dark brown to black hair.
And if you look at that sketch next to a photo or mugshot of Jeffrey Dahmer from that time period, the resemblance is
0 to none.
Dahmer was asked about the Adam Walsh murder at the time that he was arrested in the early 90s. He denied that he had anything to do with it. While the police have closed the case and while the Walsh family is content with the results of that investigation, the legend, if you will, the mystery, the fear that those of us of a certain age who were growing up, not only in America, but specifically in Florida and South Florida in those days, the fear of the Adam Walsh story lives on, I think, in all of our hearts and minds.
Detective Matthews' interview with Reeve Walsh on November 24, 1983. Important to note that this was almost 2 months after the premiere of Adam and 3 days after she and John dropped their lawsuit against Sears. The contents of Reeve's interview implies that she was considered a suspect. Detective Matthews makes it clear to Reeve that now is the time to be truthful if she has not in the past. He questions her many conflicting statements regarding times, events that occurred prior to Sears, etc. October 11, 1983, Detective Kendrick contacts Hollywood detectives the day after the Adam movie aired on national TV. He claimed Otis Toole wanted to speak to detectives about Adam's abduction and murder. I will come back to Toole. The importance here is timing. October 12, 1983, 2 days after Adam is aired, the movie apparently helps rejoin girl to parents. Welcome to the very beginning of a brand new narrative. And John Walsh's future career, of course. This is a picture of John Walsh and Hank Asher, now deceased. Hank lived 3 blocks from Sears at the time Adam disappeared. Hank was a former painter of high-rises and owned a painting company during the mid-70s. He retired by age 30, bought a house in Great Harbor, Cay, a speedboat and an Aerostar plane. According to him, these new toys attracted the attention of people with expensive tastes and ran in social circles that appealed to him. This cool new social group of Hanks also just so happened to be cocaine smugglers, which Hank inevitably becomes involved in between 1981 and 1982. According to an FDLE investigation, Asher flew up to 7 plane loads of cocaine from Colombia to the U.S., the largest being 700 kilos flown to Anoki-Chobe County Ranch. The report also alleged he was involved in a U.S.-sanctioned plot to assassinate Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega in the mid-1980s, interestingly. Somewhere along the line, Hank was approached by F. Lee Bailey, future attorney of O.J. Simpson, who had CIA connections and resided in Great Harbor, Cay as well. According to an article written in 2004 by the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, Bailey told Fiddle investigators that he and Asher concocted a plan that had Asher misleading traffickers into believing their arrests were imminent and Bailey negotiating plea deals that took the smugglers out of the business. In 1988, the same year, America's Most Wanted airs with John Walsh as host. Hank decides to get involved in freelance computer programming and data mining. A 2004 Vanity Fair article states the following. Asher was learning a programming language called Clarion. He was fascinated by it, says Bailey, because it enabled him to synthesize all these databases. Bailey had no doubt that something would come of it. Data mining was so new that no laws governed the use of the public records on which it fed. Asher could have sold his data to the public, he says, and made a lot more money while DBT was starting out, but he chose to sell it only to legitimate investigators. Right. Hank donated AutoTrack to America's Most Wanted, says Walsh. He made the overture to me. He wanted to get involved. AutoTrack's impact was hard to overestimate. Walsh had also helped set up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Here, too, AutoTrack proved invaluable. Far more children, observes Walsh, are abducted each year by what he calls the psychopath parent who didn't get custody. Of the more than 100,000 cases tracked since 1990 by the center, AutoTrack and Accurant have proved helpful in literally thousands of them. Always, Walsh notes, Asher has made his systems available to the center for free. Neither for that nor for the financial contributions he's made has he sought any public recognition. Hank doesn't want anyone to know what he gives, says Walsh, but he and the center's Ernie Allen think it's time the center's largest private donor got credit. Asher's most recent donation, only his most recent, was a reported $7.9 million. Regarding Asher's past, John Walsh, for one, waved away the story as old news. I know all the bullshit about Hank, he says. All that was cool in those days. Jimmy Buffett bragged about it. What matters, says Walsh, is that Asher has lived up to his philosophy, doing well by doing good. Wow, John, what a dramatic shift in character. Like I've said before, your attempts at impression management are futile. You defend a former drug smuggler because it is beneficial for you. You get free access to powerful databases to help find missing children. Asher served on the NCMEC board from 2003 to 2013. His drug smuggling past has always been defended by the organization, which is further validated in the newspaper clippings below. I encourage everyone to read the Vanity Fair article, as it reveals a lot of important information. One critical piece of information was quoted by Brian Stafford, former head of Secret Service and friend of Asher's. Database Technologies DBT, one of the first companies Asher founded, was behind the list of felons purged from the Florida voter rolls before the 2000 election, which, according to one article, was really a blatant disenfranchisement of legitimate voters to ensure that George W. Bush won. Based on what I've read, Asher was working at DBT in 1998 when DBT contracted with the FBI and D for this whole election fraud thing. But in May of 1999, his drug smuggling past resurfaced, which made clients uneasy, the same clients who are okay with engaging in election fraud. Asher steps down but remained a stockholder in DBT. In the fall of 1999, DBT bought out Asher for $147 million in order to regain the FBI and DEA Asher developed Matrix Multi-State Anti-Terrorism Information Exchange 2 days after 9/11. By 9/17, he had an entire bunker full of computers built at his home in Boca Raton. Anyway, Jeb Bush introduced Asher when he initially presented the software to Vice President Cheney, FBI Director Mueller, and Head of Homeland Security Tom Ridgen, January 2003. A few months later, Homeland Security gave Matrix a seal of approval and granted $8 million to get it up and running. According to Dana Jill Simpson, a whistleblower from Karl Rove's dirty politics and election fraud operation, Asher's newer data mining companies called Tlo worked for Smartech, a partisan Republican firm involved in computerized election theft. Asher died of natural causes about 2 months after Simpson released this chart. This is a roadmap from an election coalition website I found that lays it all out for you, plain as day. The green lines represent the money and the red lines represent control and power. Simpson has also stated outright in private posts on her Facebook page that Asher worked for the CIA, was their best hacker, and developed the clicker system meant to rig the 2012 election for Romney. One of the most important quotes from the Vanity Fair article was that of Brian Stafford. When discussing the public's concern about the implementation of Matrix, he states, "Matrix is not." Other notable people Asher associated with were Brian L. Stafford, former head of the Secret Service from 1999 to 2003 and former NY Mayor Rudy Giuliani. He also had former drug smugglers working for him. This is what confuses me about the privacy concerns. I'm all for privacy and we should always have those discussions. But this information is the same information that law enforcement has had access to for 20 years. The Vanity Fair article was written in December 2004, and the former head of Secret Service has stated that this database has been around since 1984. Not long after PROMIS was stolen from the Department of Justice by the Department of Justice, the DOJ oversaw every single bit of that operation. They knew exactly who Raphael Edian was, chief of the Israeli Defense Forces Anti-Terrorism Intelligence Unit, and allowed him to steal it on May 6, 1983. Enter Robert Maxwell. Edian seeks Maxwell's help to further the distribution of the PROMIS derivative software to a diverse coalition of intelligence agencies worldwide, including over $500 million in covert sales to Canada, Great Britain, Australia, South Korea, the Soviet KGB, a Polish intelligence agency, and Communist China. When they say derivative, they mean the updated version of PROMIS, which has the espionage backdoor. Then, according to federal court documents, PROMIS was stolen from Insla by the Dodge directly after Eshan's 1983 visit to Insla. Then it was stolen again and sold by Dr. Earl W. Bryan to Israel and at least 80 other countries. As a side note, Dr. Bryan was extremely close to Ronald Reagan. Ask yourselves, why has MSM lauded Reagan all these years? Inversion much?
Jeb Bush facts to keep in mind. Jeb Bush moved to Miami in March of 1980. He states the following to a reporter for Miami News in 1983. I want to be very wealthy, and I'll be glad to tell you when I've completed this goal that any other city this size anywhere else in the U.S. has a big corporate base. But here, the business power is in the hands of a lot of entrepreneurs. Jeb launched his political career in December 1983 as chairman of the Dade County Republican Party from 1984 to 1987. Jeb received $14,200 in donations from Miami home builder, convicted drug trafficker, and murder suspect Leonel Martinez, also whom had connections with Escobar. Interestingly, the Miami New Times News states the following. The early 80s drug trade was booming, and in 1981, Martinez began smuggling marijuana and cocaine. He was both bold and adept in his methods. In Colombia, during March 1981, he arranged a shipment of 24,000 pounds of pot, taking the load to Everglades City and selling it all, netting at $900,000. The next year, he hired a local gas station owner named Alcines Cruz to transport marijuana from the Bahamas in the high-powered go-fast boats favored by smugglers of that day. Martinez and Cruz imported at least 10 loads of 8,000 pounds each in the early 1980s, switching to luxury yachts for transport when drug enforcement agents began hounding every go-fast boat on the water. Martinez also was close friends with Eden Pastora, a leader of Contra rebels fighting in Nicaragua. Apparently, Pastora, who broke with the Sandinista leadership after the 1979 revolution, was a hero to anti-communist Latins in Miami and a favorite of Reagan administration policymakers in Washington. Bush was connected to BCCI drug money laundering scandal from 1986 to 1987. Feel free to take a deep dive down the Bush rabbit hole of corruption at any of the sites below this video, because this information that I'm giving you is just a grain of sand on a beach. There's so much in depth and so much more. In 2005, a 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford disappeared and ultimately was murdered. She was raped and buried alive in 2 trash bags under a foot of dirt. Her murder was blamed solely on a lone pedophile by the name of John Cooey, when there is evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that her death was connected to a very large political drug sex ring in which Mark Lunsford had a lot to do with, Jessica's father, who was most likely pimping her out to a local sex ring in the Homomosa area. The most obvious example is being Mark's child pornography collection found in the recycle bin of his computer. But that was heavily downplayed, not considered a big deal by investigators. Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, broke Megan's law by failing to inform the Citrus County Sheriff's Office that Cooey was a repeat sex offender, causing a delay in their response. Anonymous sources in the Citrus County Sheriff's Office say that there was a high-level interference from D.C. and Washington in Tallahassee, Florida, and in the Cooey case, and that it involves others. True crime writer Chris Dow investigated the Cooey case and claimed that there indeed was covered up evidence due to the political pressure. Dahl corresponded with Cooey while he was in prison. Cooey promised to reveal everything about his case, but died of natural causes shortly afterwards. Dahl became suspicious and began probing all the irregularities behind this
Anyways,
case.
technically, the development of permits really goes back to the late 70s and is a huge rabbit hole. It was first presented to the Dodge in 1981 for the purpose of case management. My point here is that all of this is occurring during the same time John Walsh is aggressively lobbying for a nationwide clearinghouse on missing children, which can all be validated in the links below this video.
The Citrus County Sheriff's Office were unable to locate Cooey, who was no longer living at the address listed in the database. However, the FDLE was aware of 4 months prior to Jessica's kidnapping that Cooey had failed to respond to a letter at his listed address. They sent a letter to him telling him to verify Cooey's location. Had the CCSO received and had acted upon this letter, it would likely have been discovered that Cooey was staying at his half-sister's trailer. The CCSO spokesman, Gail Tierney, claimed that FDLE sent this letter to CCSO's old address instead of its current address. That's just so convenient, isn't it? Due to the proximity, however, the police did visit the trailer owned by Cooey's half-sister, Dorothy Dixon, on at least 3 occasions. Cooey and Jessica were never seen, but suspicious activity was noted. Shortly after Cooey was apprehended, police arrested Dorothy Dixon, her daughter Maddie Sickern, and Dixon's boyfriend Matt Dietrich on obstruction of justice charges for lying to police by saying that Cooey did not live at the trailer when police first came to ask them. In other words, they covered for Cooey by lying for him. That's a misdemeanor in the first degree. Now, did they face any charges for that? No, they did not. Cooey was the subject of a manhunt and was also somehow able to travel down US 19 for a week without any police noticing him. He was eventually arrested in Savannah, Georgia. In addition, State Attorney Brad King and Citrus County Sheriff Jeff Dawsey, both prominent players in the Lunsford case, were accused of covering up child sex abuse at Green Isle Ranch in the nearby Lake County. And if that's not enough, FDOT Inspector General Raymond Leem was found dead at a motel in Valdosta under the suspicious circumstances while investigating Yang Enterprises, which was directly tied to voting fraud scams and child trafficking. Yang Enterprises was represented by Tom Feeney, a close friend of the Bush family. Coggins Farms of Lake Park, Georgia, is a central participant in the Valdosta sex ring. The Coggins family are Republicans and have been made large donations to former Senator Saxby Chambliss and George W. Bush. Coggins farm owner Kevin Coggins was a major player in the Georgia Republican Party. Coggins Farms has been accused of smuggling in illegal immigrants from Mexico, Honduras, and other countries to be used as farm laborers and sex slaves. Those held captive at Coggins Farms often became victims of a larger Valdosta sex ring known as the Dixie Mafia. According to some sources, political support for the Valdosta sex ring led all state and federal investigations and grand jury probes investigating the matter to be shut down on orders from the White House. Oh, and Joshua Lunsford, Mark's son and Jessica's brother, was 18 when he was charged with the felony sex assault of a minor. He was permitted to plead to a misdemeanor. He spent 10 days in jail and was not required to register as a sex offender. Meanwhile, we have John Walsh traveling the country emphasizing the fact that Megan's Law is not being followed by law enforcement and expressing sympathy for Mark Lunsford. If you think John Walsh just forgot about Mark's addiction to child pornography, you are very mistaken. He has been distracting from the truth under the guise of something that appears to be good for the purpose of covering up sex rings and those who are involved. The circumstances surrounding both Jessica's abduction and murder, her convicted killer John Cooey, and his connections with the Valdosta sex ring could fill several books.
I encourage you all to further investigate this because you all deserve to know the truth about John Walsh. The real truth. I know some of you are unfamiliar with many cases that he has been involved in or covered or has had a show about. And he was featured in each one of these. But I will show you a list and you tell me that there's something really, really weird about this. And why is he covering every single major case on the news media? You tell me. If you don't see it by now, then I don't know what to tell you guys.